Thanks for coming and talking to us and sharing your wisdom about your illustrious career. You know, they showed Michael Myers on the screen from your career, but it's so much more storied than that.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Since I basically, for Michael, it was my one acting job that I ever did, and the rest of my career was writing and directing, which is what I was trained to do out of film school.
There was a beach ball before Michael, though.
There was. Right? That's true. Now I see it. You caught me lying. There's a movie called John Carpenter's first movie was called Dark Star. I don't know if anybody has seen that. Yeah. Okay, good.
There was like three of us.
Yeah, three of us. And that was started at the University of Southern California Film School, and I worked on that with John and his partner Dan O'Bannon, who you may know from the horror fans may know from Return of the Living Dead, and of course his big screen debut. Was it his first movie? Wow, Alien, the original Alien, written by Dan O'Bannon. So they were the filmmakers of these things, and I would come in and help them out. And they created this kind of comic villain alien called the Beach Ball Monster we called it because it was made from a beach ball, painted to look like a tomato, and I went behind it and made it look like it was breathing. So that was my first foray into vinyl acting.
What was the just the feeling of making films in that era? You know, nowadays everyone has access to all kinds of film equipment and the ability to do that, but back then that was not.
Well, there was no electricity back then. That's how long ago it was. You cranked. No, there was electricity.
I'm not that young.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking. What it was like? Well, back then, it was film school back in the Dark Star age, and you were doing things in 16 millimeter film, obviously, and with a very limited crew. And then even as we started to do our first features, they were done on a shoestring by comparison, and you just kind of. You started to get into the larger formats and the more expensive equipment, and then suddenly you're a real director.
So obviously your early career and some of your writing worked out with John Carpenter, and obviously some of your musical talent as well with John Carpenter. What was that relationship like, working on his films and then writing films for him?
Well, John and I wrote we're part of the team that did a screenplay, and then we're part of the production of a short at University of Southern California. This is even before Dark Star, that won an Academy Award for short subjects. So that was kind of an early success of ours. So we've been working together ever since, and he and his best friend Tommy Wallace from Kentucky, which they're both from. Tommy directed Halloween 3 and was the person that invented the mask. Many of you, I'm sure, know of that name. They were rock and roll partners together. They were in bands together, and I was in bands. So when we realized we were all wanted to be rock and roll stars, this was something we all had in common. So we've been playing music ever since. Not so much lately. But John's continued on with all his music, with his sons doing shows. In fact, if anyone's in California now, Los Angeles in October, and I think New York too, he's going to be doing some of his shows that are fantastic live performances, where he shows on the screen, his movies, and they do clips or songs from the title music, and it's quite an experience if you haven't seen it. So look for the John Carpenter experience in October this year.
How did you end up as the shape, as they called it? Because Michael Myers wasn't It seems like it's always credited as The Shape. Did you call the character Michael Myers on the set, or was it always The Shape on the set?
They would say, Nick, get over here.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember us, it wasn't as if it was an iconic character yet, so there was no pageantry towards getting the character onto the set. It was just like, put on the mask and go. The reason I was on the set at all was, you heard that I was friends with John in film school, and he was the first one out of the gate to get a feature going, and so he had all the experience, and now this was his third film. They were shooting it near my house in Hollywood, and I just decided to go over there and see if I could just snoop around and learn, by being around the set, dispel any fears I might have for when I was going to eventually direct. And when I told John that, he said, well, hang around then, and here, be this guy. And that way you're here, and I have someone that I know will do what I tell him to do. And that was it. There was nothing more dynamic than that. It was a real throwaway, but here I am 150 years later, just still doing this stuff.
I want to ask about some of your directing, but first I want to take a question from the audience. First, so why don't we take our first question?
Maybe this will lead into directing. As much as I love Escape from New York, I annually watch The Last Starfighter. It is my absolute favorite movie of all time. I own it in multiple formats. And I was wondering if you could just share a favorite memory or something that you really have enjoyed about that movie. And I hope it's never remade, because it is absolute perfection.
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. It was my second movie as a director. It was kind of thrown at me from a studio that liked my little small movie that maybe, hopefully this year, will actually, for the first time, come out on DVD. It's called Tag, The Assassination Game, with Linda Hamilton's first movie, and Robert Carradine is in it, so it was fun. Little college hijinks, drama, slasher, comedy. And someone saw that and liked it at a studio, and they sent me the script that I didn't like very much at the beginning. I liked the idea of it, because it did have that core great idea about a boy who plays video games who it turns out to be a recruitment tool. And it's when I got that, I said, this could be good, but I need a lot of work on it. And I went in fully expecting the producer, Gary Adelson at Lorimar, to say, fuck you, get out of here. But he didn't. He liked what I had to say. And then I'm off and running on a science fiction movie that I was ill-prepared for. I didn't have any background like that. But I think what I brought to it was kind of the charm and the comedy and the lightness of it. And then we had great people on it. Ron Cobb, who's you guys should all know if you don't already, is a great designer and a great artist and a great cartoonist. He did all the characters, the ships. One of the great production designers along with him, James Bissell, who did E.T. and other great movies. So I had a wonderful team that would keep me in, But as far as the movie was concerned, it was kind of it came upon me so slowly, because we had almost like 8 or 9 months to massage the script to make it good before we got the go-ahead on doing it, because the production company wanted to do the effects digitally. And this had never been done before in terms of trying to make something look photoreal. Tron had been out, and they did, that within that context of a video game. But this wanted to be real. So it was, revolutionary in that sense. That was kind of exciting. And we went into the production of that without knowing if it could work, which is one of the stupidest and scariest things you'd ever want to try. You're banking all your money on a system that may not work, and you're still going to do it. That's what happened. And so there was a lot of anxiety, but it came off. And as far as your statement about don't ever redo it again, we hope to not redo it again, but right now the original writer and I are working on a screenplay that takes place 40 years later.
be great.
And we think it would be a lot of fun, and we're hoping that the old fans will love it, and we're trying to make that crazy kind of 3D chess thing of how do you make it great for anyone that hasn't seen it, and how do you make it great for people that love it. So that's a long-winded answer on where it's at and what I liked about it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for the compliment again.
I want to ask about Last Starfighter. You know, I read that you've said that you wanted to try to avoid, you know, it's 84, I believe, is when it came out, and you wanted to avoid the Lucas and Spielberg moves because you know, you'd had the Star Wars movies come out, you had E.T. had come out, and you kind of got to the point on the production. I'd read that you'd said like, well, maybe they knew what they were doing. And you just said, you know, we're trying to push this technology that we didn't know, which sounds very Lucas. Mm-hmm. And there's a few shots in there that feel very I'm thinking specifically the shot with Lewis at the end, standing in front of the arcade machine with the lights pouring down on him. It felt very Spielberg. Like, at what point did you sort of embrace that? When you look at Last Starfighter now, it feels very much part of that 80s canon that Lucas and Spielberg sort of started to establish.
Well, yeah, you know, I think we did as a goal try to not duplicate things that they did. You know, that you think of as iconic and in the worlds that they created, and very quickly you realize, God damn it, they just knew what they were doing, and there was an obvious, you know, momentum towards that, you know, whatever the question was, that answer that they've already come up with. So our idea was, okay, well, that's it. You know, we have a boy in a trailer park that's going to become a big fighter in space. That is George Lucas. You know, that is Star Wars. If you remember the beginning, he's isolated. He wants to be something. He never is going to be. I mean, there's a lot of that. I mean, we just want shit. We can't get away from that. So, you know, let's just make sure we have our own, take our own shot at that, you know, and not worry so much about the fact that these are tropes that are really going to be things that we will come up against, you know, throughout this. And then Stephen was wonderful about doing things of, you know, a real world where something magical comes into the midst of it. And again, you know, you're stuck with his brilliance. And you know, things just evolve. You know, that last shot with the kid I just thought was obvious. You know, it's like, you know, you see the ship go up, the backwash of the engines, and he's silhouetted, and he's looking at the Starfighter machine, and he's looking at the real thing at the same time. It's just kind of like, it gave me chills, you know, to think of it. And so that's how it worked out.
Do you think Escape from New York and your experience with that, did you have much experience from writing to, did you get to work with Carpenter on the set for that? Did any of that experience help prepare you for Last Starfighter?
Yeah, well, very much so. John, first of all, kindly asked me to help him on the second draft of the screenplay. He had done the first screenplay directly out of college. He wrote that and put it in the, you know, in the drawer. And then years later, after he's done Halloween and stuff like that, someone's asking him, well, what's the next thing you want? And he just pulled it out of the drawer and told him what the idea was, and they gave him the okay. And he talked to me and said, Nick, I need tremendous amount of help with this, but this is a good idea, kind of like we were talking about the Starfighter. So I came in and helped shape it and give it a little bit more humor. But as to your question, yeah, John was gracious enough to let me be on the set the whole time. I wasn't there for the early St. Louis stuff that looked like bombed out New York after the apocalypse. And they didn't have to do any set design in St. Louis at the time. It looked like that in East St. Louis, evidently. other than that, everything was shot in L.A. and New York. And so, yeah, I got to be on it. It was a tremendous amount of information processed, through the whole thing. That and Halloween. The 2 times I was on a set prior to being a director, where you get to see how the soup is made, and it's amazing how much you learn doing, you really because there are long hours, there's a lot of decisions to be made, and John was very good. One of the things I learned from him is how best to give a sense of the set itself and how people should be treated on the set, and how to get the best out of everyone, and have everyone enjoy the experience, because it can be pretty crazy when you're having producers tell you got to move, go faster, and that can sometimes rub the wrong way. So John had a good demeanor, and that was something I learned about from him.
I'm going to go to another question here.
So one of the most iconic parts in Halloween is the famous head tilt. Mm-hmm. Was that your idea, or was that the director's idea? Was that John Carpenter's to tell you that, or was that just like an instinct to do that? Because that still resonates so well on film all these years later, that iconic head tilt.
Well, it's all John. I remember actually being in the scene, standing there after the guy's pinned to the wall, and John saying, just stand there and look at him. And he said, then I heard him say, tilt your head to the right. Now tilt your head to the left. I had no idea what he was doing. And it wasn't until I saw the dailies myself, I went, oh, that's cool. It's kind of like he's admiring his kill, or he's like an animal, like looking at something. Why isn't it moving anymore, So, it was John. That was John's inspiration.
Yeah, it's amazing. We still love it.
It's a good one.
Why don't we take another question?
Hello. Hi. So there's a YouTube channel out there called Death Battle, and they have 2 fictional characters that will never actually meet in any media fight each other to the death. And they did one with Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, and I wonder who you think would win in that battle.
Oh, who would win in that battle? Well, I'm going to have to take Michael, aren't I? I know some of those Jason guys, though. Don't tell them, because they can beat me up.
It's interesting watching the late 70s, early 80s sort of slasher phenomenon that sort of grew really out of Halloween on a blockbuster sort of level. Yeah, don't worry about that. Where you had, the first Friday the 13th movie and the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and sort of, Halloween was a little bit ahead of those. And going back, I always sort of marvel at the fact that, like, at least with Halloween, Michael Myers was in the first movie, where Jason doesn't even get his hockey mask till 3. You guys, nailed it in 1.
Well, it really was a phenomenon. It was a gigantic surprise to all involved. But it just, everything clicked. You had, and the first of which was, or a couple of things that I think were fundamental to its appeal was, one, it was called Halloween, and clever. The first really clever idea about connecting a horror film to that particular yearly event. So every year you knew that would come out, and you'd see it again probably. 2, The Mask, Tommy Lee Wallace's inspired creation from an old Shatner mask, because it just, something about it. To this day, you see people walking around in here with it on. It's kind of spooky. And then the music, there's tons of other things, the photography and everything. But John's music, I remember a story that Tommy Wallace told me. He was one of the 2 editors on the picture, and they had seen the rough cut of the movie. Rough cut meaning, it's all assembled and stuff like that. They show it, to themselves, and they watch and they say, hey, not bad. I think it's working. Then John went off in 3 days, did the whole score. They laid it in. They saw the movie again and went, oh my God, it really works. You didn't know, really, until that music. And of course, it's, you know, one of the great scores now, amazingly so, of the history of motion pictures. So that's pretty funny, yeah. So, you know, those things were you don't know when you're going to get lightning in a bottle, and that did. And it started a craze, you know, and it made, the other thing is, of course, it made tons of money. Not right off the bat, not the first couple weeks, and then it got some good reviews. Roger Ebert gave it a great review, and people started to look at it as not just some stupid B movie, which it is, let's face it, but is also something from a filmmaker to be watched, you know, because of the way John handled, especially the scenes and the camera and everything like that. So there you go.
Speaking of Shatner and the Mask, you know, he's here. Have you ever heard from him about like how he felt about having his face, his mask, or his face of his mask used for that?
Well, this is interesting that you say that, because today was the first day I ever met William Shatner. It's in the green room. I don't know, you know what a green room is, where they stuff all of the talent there when they're not working so they can have something to eat and maybe rest a little bit. And there he was, and I sat down, and here he was. I went, so I waited for a while for a good opening. I went, Bill? And he went, yes. I went, my name is Nick Castle. I just want to introduce myself. I am the killer in the original Halloween. And he went, oh. Something like that. I went, and here's what I wanted to say. Thank you for your face. But what I said was, sorry if we bothered you with all this, but, you know, I just had to say hello. And he went, I know, I've heard. And then he went into what he heard about how it was found. And so we talked a little bit about that. It was very nice about it. And what I didn't do, what I should have done, is demand a photo of me and him together. So maybe I'll get that before we leave this.
I hear they have photo ops here at the con.
That's right.
Okay, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Hi. So I was wondering, just because I'm a big horror movie fan, and like Halloween was kind of my first horror movie. My mom hated watching it with me, but you know, she did anyway.
You make her do it, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was wondering, like, what's it kind of feel like to be part of such an iconic legacy? Like you guys are talking about, like the music, the mask, just the name Halloween or the name Michael Myers is just so big in horror and pop culture nowadays. So how do you feel about being part of such an iconic legacy for so many years?
Well, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's, like I said, unexpected. I didn't think this will. I used to laugh and tell people, you know, this is the thing that won't be any of my other movies that I spent my heart and soul on. This will be the thing on my tombstone, you know. And now I laugh. I mean, it will be the thing on my fucking tombstone, and it will be probably what I'm known for. It'll be the first thing on the obituary. And then he did some other movies, you know. So I have fun with it, you know. I was resisted a little bit coming to shows at the very beginning. I thought, really? I was just under a mask, you know. John did all the work, and Deborah, and he wrote it, and Tommy found the mask, and all I did was walk around. They said, no, people want to meet you. They think you did a good job. I went, okay. Now I'm convinced you're right.
There is
Finally.
There is definitely a physicality of the performance that it is different movie to movie, actor to actor. And I think everybody here would probably agree with that. Generally. We can't see anybody's head nodding because of the lights, but I'm assuming you're nodding, yes. So I think there is definitely something different about you playing the character versus other people.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was an unusual character. You know, I think I weighed about 155, 160 pounds at the time, and I was 5'11 and a half, so I was lean. So you had that. And I had all this hair that was stuffed underneath there, so it made the mask be whatever it was because of the way it laid over my head. But then, John was, you're forgetting one thing, is that John never directed another Halloween. And I had the best director. Not that the other guys were bad at their job, but he really started it. He came up with it. He knew what he wanted out of the character, and again, this kind of lightning in a bottle thing happened, and I think it relates to the luck of being in the right place at the right time with the right physicality.
The way you describe the way he directed you across the frame sounds very much the way people describe Hitchcock's directing, as far as the mechanics of exactly where he wants things in the frame.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's a good comparison. Hitchcock, if you guys don't know, was very much about pre-production, storyboarding every frame, knowing exactly where he wanted it, and he treated, for better or worse, usually for better, his actors as puppets. You walk here, you walk there, you turn around, now you say your line. John's very matter of fact too in that way, not quite as stern as that sounds, but he knew exactly what he wanted. And, in a sense, I was kind of puppeteered. Here you go, here you come out of the shadows now. And in this kind of a movie, for that matter, it's more more of a design like that. You don't, the actors aren't giving free rein with, a 22-day shoot, and we better get it in one take,
Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much.
I want to ask about one that I read about, and it's always something like you can't be sure how you read about it, but one that sort of got away. But something you developed, and I kind of want to get the truth behind everything I read about one you almost did, which was Hook. And that was something that I'd read that you'd put together, and it didn't work out, and then Steven Spielberg came in and sort of took over. And I'm wondering what happened there. This is why I asked.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything you don't want to talk about? Hoping you'd be like, Hook.
No, there is a whole part of Hook which needs to maintain its secrecy because what are those things that you sign
like
away?
An NDA?
Yes, or else you get killed by some,
Yeah.
mafia guy from the studio. Well, yeah, that was unfortunate. I mean, I developed that screenplay with the screenplay writer and the producer, went to the studio with it, and we came up with a great first draft. We sent it to the people that eventually were in the movie, Dustin Hoffman and Robin Williams, and we're basically waiting for a green light, looking at, and then the new studio head, this is where things get very political there. New studio head just saw me not as the director. He just thought this was too big a movie to lay, at the incompetent hands of Mr. Nick Castle. So that's when it all changed. Stephen came on board after a while. He'd always wanted to do a Peter Pan movie. Everyone always knew that. And I think when he heard about this, he got very excited about it. So it's what's ironic though is it's Stephen's least favorite movie that he did, which I'm pissed at. Because I always thought that was going to be. I mean, a lot of people love that movie anyhow, and you see a lot of charm in it. But when I saw it, I was disappointed because I just didn't. It wasn't what I had seen, and of course, you always think you're the greatest. So, but it went on to do that. I went on and did Dennis the Menace instead, right after that, and I had a great old time in Chicago with Walter Matthau. I can't complain too much.
And you brought Mason Gamble to everyone, and who I don't know how he was as a little kid, but he ended up in one of my favorite movies in Rushmore, and one of my favorite moments on the Rushmore commentary was Wes Anderson talking about how, I was going to hate this kid because he was in Dennis the Menace, but it turns out he was so good. But yeah, that was Dennis the Menace was really enjoyable. So
Yeah, it was a fun movie, and he was Dennis the Menace. He was a terror, but he was a terror. I mean, the best kind of terror, I guess. He was literally 5 years old, starring. He was the star of the movie, and he was in a lot of the frames and stuff like that. But when he wasn't acting, when you went action, he was perfect. Cut, he went over and kicked somebody in the balls. It was just a holy terror. You had to go run after him. We had all these ADs, assistant directors, running after the kid. But I did love him. He was ultimately a sweetheart.
how does an old pro like Walter Matthau deal with that?
He just gets out of the way.
Oh, okay. What's your question?
All right. Just kind of piggybacking off the last question. How does it feel to have your legacy as Michael Myers not really be one of like inspiration, but more like terror, like inspiring fear in the hearts of like kids everywhere?
Well, I don't think of it quite like that. I just think of it as just another movie star out there, or a celebrity, and it's celebrity. There's so much of the love that I think passion people have is the nostalgia of the time that they saw a movie, and it could have been a love story or a suspense story. Like one of mine is The Great Escape, with Steve McQueen. I just remember that. I just love that. And even really silly movies like Elvis Presley's Blue Hawaii. I love that because I was in love with all the girls when I was turning 13. But this one, it's amazing how many people come up and say, I saw this with my mom. I saw this with my grandparent. I'm showing it to my kids. It's kind of like becomes something that bonds, whether it's scary or not. The scare part of it, I think, is just fun because I don't take it too seriously in terms of the killing and all that stuff. It's part of the suspense of the movie, and so I have I'm very happy that I was a part of it, and its legacy lives on here. That's as the people coming up to the booth and our table attest to, and. There's all these, not just these Comic Cons, but a lot of horror conventions. I don't know if you guys have gone to these, they're specifically horror. That gets into the weeds with all the characters. They know everything about this. So, I think it would have been the same if it was just a great comedy that I had done and made everyone laugh. Here I make everyone scared.
Does that feel at odds at all with some of the movies you're best known for, like with the hope of Last Starfighter or some of the pathos of The Boy Who Could Fly? Because it feels like as a director, your paradigm is much different than the stuff you're known for as an actor.
Well, yeah. I mean, my interest from film school, my dad was a choreographer. He was a dance director in musicals. He choreographed Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Gene Kelly, Judy Garland, all real iconic 30s and 40s and 50s musicals. So, and that's kind of where I was leaning towards wanting to do musicals. I did one that you could say is a musical, but it wasn't a breakout into a song musical, called Tap with Gregory Hines and Sammy Davis Jr. Take a look at that someday. It's really an homage to my dad, who was a tap dancer. Oh, thank you. Thanks. So I always thought in that sensibility. You see the musicals, they're kind of goofy. They're a little bit bigger than life. And when I did The Last Starfighter, for instance, I once mentioned to someone, we're doing a musical here. That's how big I wanted. Robert Preston, who was in The Music Man, was one of the leads. And I said, we're doing a musical, just no music. But I want it to be, that much fun and a little bit broad.
It's that scene where, Alex is going to break the record. Come on, guys. It's that scene in the musical where the entire chorus comes up and looks behind them. It's exactly that.
It's exactly, yes. Good observation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I loved Halloween, and it scared me. So I was wondering if you were ever able to scare anyone on set with you, like in real life.
No. I didn't try to, and I keep the mask in the closet, and No, I never took the opportunity to just go around scaring people. But like I said, it is a scary ass mask, and anyone that puts it on, I think suddenly you're suspicious of. So I do love it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next question.
Okay, so I will be 55 in June, and I
A
have
youngster.
So yeah, I've seen. So your movies have been part of my life, but I want to be a screenwriter, and I've been told I'm too old to do that. I don't know. People are stupid. So I was just wondering if you have any advice for someone who is starting this late in life, thinking about becoming a screenwriter or wanting to become. I'm not thinking about it, but wanting to become a screenwriter.
Well, it's not the nuts and bolts of doing a screenwriter, including the inspiration, that is the problem, is that you're going into a medium that's very expensive, usually, unless you're doing shorts, which is a real possibility and an area that I would look into to start your career. But the reason that I got to be a writer was, I think we've kind of laid the groundwork for this, is that I went to film school. I met John Carpenter. He got out of the gate quick. He brought me on for Escape from New York, and suddenly I had a career, I had a credit.
Yeah.
So it's who you know.
Okay.
So if that isn't part of, you have to, for practical reasons, that's part of what you have to think about. Do you know? Who do you know? How do I get to know? Because the screenplay itself is not a book where you can go to I assume, I don't know that world at all, maybe just as bad, but it's there, it's there and it's produced and it's complete. With a screenplay, it's basically the pattern for what you're going to eventually do. So I would hook up with filmmakers, if you know filmmakers that are going through their early lives as filmmakers or coming out of school. And as far as the contact is concerned, in terms of how to become a good screenwriter, there's actually some great books on that in terms of knowing plotting and character arcs and all the kind of things you do. And then the most important thing as a screenwriter is to watch movies and to love movies and to know the history of movies. The passion comes out after you just enjoy and find what really moves you.
Yeah. Because I've watched movies going as far back as like The Pawnbroker.
Oh yeah, go even further. There's a lot of great movies. Yeah, when we went to film school, that was one of the best things that John and I and all the rest of the guys and women found out about, is that they would do retrospectives, of great directors, comedy directors, Preston Sturges and Billy Wilder, and people from the 30s and 40s who made, who created the templates for all of us, and they still resonate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to ask, and we'll get to these two questions really fast, and we're running out of time. Is there a movie you've worked on that you just don't get asked in settings like this about, that you like talking about?
Well, I did mention Tap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an unusual one for this group, because it's in the musical genre, and it's a drama, and so that one, the one I would have hoped to have more ears and eyes on was a movie I did in the late it was like 2000, I think it came out, but very short release, called Delivering Milo, and that was a fantasy with Albert Finney as the lead, and Anton Yelchin, who sadly died as Anton from Star Trek, right? Mm-hmm. He was the 10-year-old in that one, and I think that's a really cute movie that I think didn't get any really much fanfare, but a good one take a look at.
Okay.
Yes, when it came time to unmask the shape, whose decision was it to have someone else portray Michael Myers instead of yourself?
Well, first of all, Tony Moran was the person that, when the mask goes off, that you see. I think they wanted to, well, first of all, they had the young person, remember, playing Michael. Why can't I think of his name? You guys? Someone knows his name. Please. He's going to be pissed at me because I know him really well. In any case, they had that person cast, so they wanted to have similar look,
matched.
you know,
Yeah.
after 15 years. I looked nothing like the kid, and I think they didn't want a kind of ethnic face like mine. They wanted kind of maybe more angelic. And so that's what they went with. I always wondered if that was the right thing to do, because it made him too specific again. You know, Michael was never seen until then, so why show him there? What did it add to the, to the drama? But Tony did a great job, and they went with it. But I think it was because, they just had a different idea of the look.
Thank you.
Sure. Will Sandin, yes, there you go,
Okay.
thank you.
Last question, really quick.
Hey, as a director, is there a certain scene that the studio wanted you to cut that you had to fight for to put into the movie? Or is there something that you wanted to be in the movie and they just flat out wouldn't let you have in there?
In which movie?
Any
movie?
Any movie that you had?
Oh, yeah,
There's
there's
one
the-
that's like bothers you the most that didn't make it in.
Well, I did a movie that was a big flop called Mr. Wrong with Ellen DeGeneres and Bill Pullman. And I still contend that if I had they had allowed me to keep the raunchiest stuff in that movie that was written and we put in it, it would have had at least a different, it had more of a shot to do it. But they kind of pulled it back, and for what was supposed to be a black comedy, dark comedy, it just took the edge off it, and it became kind of nothing. So that's something that and in fact, at the time when they did it, I said, okay, I had a presentation credit where it said a Nick Castle film. I said, you're going to just have to take that off because it's no longer my film. I'll be the director, yes, that's what I did. But and they looked at me like, what is he going to do? Sabotage the movie? No, I'm not going to sabotage. That's how much I feel it's changed because of that. So that's an example that happens. That happens quite often, with studios. They think they know better than the filmmakers, and sometimes they do, by the way.
Did they tamper with Last Starfighter at all, or is that pretty much what you wanted to do?
No, that was great, and in fact, they were very supportive. Once we did the initial screenings, test screenings, everyone loved, if you know the movie, the beta unit comedy parts, that were spread throughout the movie. And they actually said, let's do more. So they put more money into it to do more cutaways to this, and it all worked out really well. So I think that's an instance where the studio is behind you, understands the thing, and wants to improve the project.
It's always great when the studio just wants to throw more money at you.
Absolutely, especially me.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Nick. And Indianapolis, why don't we give it up for Nick?
Thank you all.
This has been a great conversation. Thanks so much.
And wonderful job, my friend.
Thank you.